My guest today is Rory Hennessey from IMP. Yes, that's IMP. I love the name of your company. A smart landline call filtering technology that simply makes, wait for it, spam calls go away, resulting in welcome calls only. And as I was telling Rory, that one of the things I love about having these interviews and these conversations with technology leaders and people creating solutions for family caregivers is when something really applies to me as well as a personal family caregiver, which this does. Delivering on their mission to save the world from the scourge of unwanted callers, and we know that, involves three patent-pending parts that make up IMP: Greenlist technology, the IMP box, and the IMP app. I like that, the IMP app. So let's just jump right in, because this is something I think that a lot of people are sitting on the edge of their chairs, just waiting for that unwanted call not to come and figure out how to beat that. Why don't traditional call blockers work, and what makes IMP different?
Yeah, so the idea of call blockers is really nothing new. The technology has been around since the 70s and 80s and 90s, and our founder George has tried every iteration of them. And the issue with call blockers, especially today, there are a couple of main reasons. One is the technology is just so good for these spammers that it's so easy to spoof a number. And by spoof, what we mean by that is when you look at your caller ID, chances are you'll recognize the area code, or you'll see a name that looks like it's someone that you should recognize. And in fact, we're caregivers for my grandmother up here in New Hampshire, and the very first thing we did was we had to put an IMP into her landline in her bedroom, because she would say, "Oh, I answered the call because I thought it was somebody from back home, and I should have known their number." And it's just, scammers are onto that, and technology makes it so easy to pretend to be somebody else. So one, technology is easy to fool the call blockers. Two, it's also super cheap to place these outbound calls, and so scammers are literally paying pennies per call to just flood landlines everywhere. So it's super cheap, the technology is really good, and there's just an abundance of phone numbers to use. And so for us here, we have this company Dynata that keeps calling, and we've blocked these companies 80 different times. But because there are so many available phone numbers, you cut off one head and 5 more pop up. And so they're able to easily and cheaply just call you from a different number. And that circumvents traditional call blockers. And then the last part is, it doesn't do you any good to try to block a call after the fact, right? If you're trying to block afterwards, it's already too late. And so what we do at IMP is that we stop the calls before they even have a chance to get started. And that's where the Greenlist technology comes into play. That's where the whole IMP system comes in. And really, we want to stop unwanted calls before the phone can even ring.
Well, how are caregivers using IMP at this point?
So we have caregivers using it in a number of different ways. From, for example, local caregivers. So we have a family of 2 sons and a daughter who live locally to mom, and they trade off their responsibilities. And so what IMP allows them to do is, the pharmacy calls and leaves mom a message, "Hey, your prescription's ready." Well, the sister calls the brother, or the brother, they all get the message in their on their smartphone, and then they can coordinate who's picking that up. So it helps kind of delegate that responsibility and that level of care. The other thing is that it's easy for remote caregivers. For example, we have another member out on the West Coast. Mom is down in the South, and the daughter, she is able. Her quote to us was that IMP it's been great in that it's eliminated these unwanted calls, but the bigger value add to her is that it's given her a window into mom's life that she otherwise wouldn't have known about. Mom has taken out insurance policies that nobody knew about, and so the insurance companies are calling and leaving voice messages, and she's out on the West Coast getting them and saying, "Oh man, I didn't even know this was an issue. I didn't even know that this was a problem." And so while IMP is living up to its promise of getting rid of these unwanted calls, it's also allowing these remote caregivers and caregivers in general, just a portal into what's going on in the home when you're not around, and in addition to providing that additional insight.
That's really smart and really important. You had mentioned green list technology. What is that? How does that work?
Yeah, so our green list technology is, so when we started IMP, so call blocking kind of, the paradigm, the lens through which most companies have approached this problem is by starting with the calls you don't want. But again, that's a tough place to start from, because there are just so many of those calls. And so we flipped that equation on its head and said, well, what if we started with the calls that we actually do want? Because that's a much smaller pool of people. That's a much smaller list that we can do stuff with. And so that's where green list technology comes from. And so green list technology and our green list it makes up the callers that you actually do want to hear from. And the way that works is at setup, you plug in the IMP box into your landline, and then it syncs with your smartphone, and it specifically syncs with your contacts. And so now the contacts that are in your smartphone, your landline phone will now recognize them, and the only time your landline will ring is if it's somebody that's in your contact list. And so we call that our green list and our green list technology. And so that's each and every call that comes into your landline, IMP is looking, reading it, and then deciding how to handle that call for you.
And what if somebody's not in your green list? What a contact?
Yes. Yeah, so we have 3 different lists. We have the green list, which we just talked about, with the list of callers that you want to talk to. These are the people in your contacts. At the other end of the spectrum, we have what we call the red list. And the red list are what you think about when you think of traditional call blockers. These are known bad guys. The issue with that is, what we're seeing is that these red listed callers make up only 5% of all calls. And so the bulk of callers end up in this middle area, what we call our gray list. And these are callers that aren't in your contacts. You haven't decided to block them. And so what IMP says is, hey, we're not sure what you want to do with this right now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to silently take a message, and we'll send you the message. And if this is somebody that you want to move over to your green list, no problem. If it's somebody you want to put on the red list, great. But we're initially going to not let them make your phone ring, and we're going to take a message for you. And then you can decide when and how and if you want to call them back or deal with that call.
What kind of control, you mentioned this earlier, does a caregiver have? What kind of interaction does a caregiver have when IMP is on their loved one's phone?
So we have that's kind of on a caregiver by caregiver basis. Some caregivers are working with their parents, depending on what stage of Alzheimer's they're dealing with. Sometimes in the earlier stages, the recipient says, hey, these are who I want to hear from. And so the caregiver will work to do that. In other situations, the caregiver is saying, okay, I only want these 5 calls to come through to mom. And so IMP silently sits in the corner. Mom doesn't, it's not in her way. She's not jumping out at her. And so the caregiver is able to fine tune that list to what makes the most sense. But the idea with IMP is that it's meant to work like a landline in your home, where multiple people can manage it, multiple people can use it, and multiple people get the messages and see them as calls, and really make it the communal tool that the landline that we grew up with that it was meant to be.
So what is the IMP box? How does it work? What does it mean?
Yeah, so we spent 2 years developing the hardware for the IMP box, and it's it's probably a 6x6 square, maybe about an inch, inch thick. It's pretty minimal footprint, and it plugs into your landline phone. And so you take your landline, plug it into the IMP box, and then the IMP box is plugged into a power source. And what happens is the IMP box it does the dirty work of checking each and every call. And so that is where at setup, your smartphone or app syncs up with that piece of hardware, the IMP box. And the IMP box is actually doing the checking for the calls. And then kicking that information up over to the app. And so if you're a caregiver, you get this information from wherever you are. You don't need to be in the house. You don't need to be standing next to your phone to listen to your voicemail. The inbox is a hardware that then facilitates all the notifications and messages from wherever you are.
Okay, I'm interested. I want impishness in my house. I want to get an imp. What's my next step? Where do I get it? And then how do I set it up?
So these are available online on our website, joinimp.com. That's join, Join, imp, IMP.com. And there are some requirements, some technology requirements in order for imp to work. In the house that imp is being set up in, the user does need obviously a landline phone, does need caller ID enabled on the landline phone, and does need wireless internet. And then to complete that setup, you do need a smartphone. So, for my grandmother, for example, she doesn't have a smartphone, but we have all the other technology, and I use my smartphone to set it up for her. So the recipient doesn't need to have a smartphone, but there is a need for that in the process. And setting up, we've made it super easy to set up. It's a plug and play 5-minute process. You literally plug it in, connect it, and then the app and the inbox talk and do their thing, and you're up and running, stopping unwanted calls in under 5 minutes. That being said, we also have actual real life people. If you have any questions, and you can call us up on the phone, we're happy to schedule FaceTimes. We're happy to schedule Zooms. But we make the setup process as easy and painless as possible.
Those are two very important things, that there's somebody on the other end of the line to help us, and that it's set up to be easy. We don't need a degree, technology degree, to go in and set it up in the
Exactly
house.
right. Yes, exactly right.
Hey, do you have any anecdotes or any stories that caregivers have told you about their interaction with IMP, how they're, how it's working for them and their families?
Yeah, in fact, we've even created an entire page of caregiver reviews. I've been involved with e-commerce and selling things online for about 15 years now, and was specifically drawn to IMP because of our family. And my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and the first thing grandma did was she had to remove the phone. And so we lost that. She had a cell phone, so we can call and talk to her, but we lost our ability to call grandpa. And so that's a long way of saying we get emails on a weekly basis, unsolicited, from caregivers saying IMP has completely transformed mom's life. She's much less anxious. She's much happier. It's made her, the phone isn't ringing, and when it does ring now, she goes towards the phone to actually answer it, because she knows it's somebody she wants to talk to. And so that's really, if there is a theme in these emails that we get, it's the house is less anxious. It's much more peaceful, and mom is happier. But then the caregivers are also, their theme is it's made my life much. There's home security systems. There's pieces you can set up everywhere, but the landline is still that one back door that people can sneak into. And so we have, this is how we've really found our way with the caregiver market, is just through caregivers reaching out to us and saying, hey, this is how we're using it, and this is why it's useful for other caregivers.
Well, that's exciting. That's an interesting comment, because if I remember correctly, IMP wasn't necessarily created to support caregivers, but once caregivers found out about it, they started swarming you guys up there and going, yeah, I don't care what else you're using it for. I need it.
That's exactly right. So up here in New Hampshire, we're in the woods. We don't have great cell reception, so a lot of us still have landlines, and having landlines in New Hampshire means you are getting a ton of political calls.
Oh.
You're getting pollsters, you're getting politics. It's always just ringing all day long. And so George, our founder, he said enough is enough with this, and he, like I said, spent 2 years developing the hardware and the software to get this out there, because it was a problem that he just wanted solved for himself. You look at the numbers, and obviously billions of dollars are stolen over the phone every year.
Yeah.
And it's just outside of the annoyance issue, right? But so that's where we're going, is you have people signing up for the do not call list, and plenty of people aggravated by the nonstop unwanted calls. And caregivers, again, because having gone through it and having my grandmother, I was sensitive to that market, but we thought, hey, like, I'm sure there's a need there and we'll figure it out. But the open arms in which the caregivers embraced us, and
Oh,
just
yeah.
started, sending us these love letters that were just incredible. It was, we're actually doing something for we're doing something meaningful in a place for people that truly need it, the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable populations we have. And here we have a solution that helps them. And so for us, it's been really fulfilling to continue to invest in these relationships, and become an active member of the caregiver community.
Yeah. Now I always say that a caregiver will bang down walls to get to a solution that they believe is going to help their loved ones. Nothing will get in our way. So I'm
Right.
glad that we found you guys. Hey, Rory, what would be the one most important piece of advice as a caregiver you'd like to share with your fellow caregivers?
For us, the hardest thing, I think, is just being patient. It's such a hard thing. It's with grandma here, it's great. For all my life as a kid, you always want to live with grandma, because going to grandma's house is always the best thing. And now here you are, and grandma's living with you, and it's different than what you thought of when you were 8 years old, right? And so understanding grandma as a person and where she is now, and just, it's not just doctor's trips, it's not just protecting her from spam calls, it's not just making sure her pharmacy stuff is refilled. It's really it's all these little things that add up, and just reminding yourself to be patient with them, and really cherish the opportunity to be here and give back to them. Because for most caregivers, it really is a payback for everything that we were given. And so I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity. My wife is very, very grateful to have a grandmother. It's different for her. She didn't have that kind of relationship. And so for us, it's been an exercise of patience that's been really, really rewarding the more patient we are.
I love it. I appreciate that. In all these years, think that's maybe the first time that someone answered with patience, and I think it's so important. I appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you, George, and thank all you, the impers, the impish people.
Impsters.
Impster. I knew there was a word.
There we go. Yeah.
For bringing him to the world, and hopefully we'll share this with a lot of caregivers, because we sure as heck need it.
Great. Thank you so much for having us, Gary. Again, we are, it's so fulfilling to be able to work with this caregiver community, and we are very fortunate to have the opportunity to do so. So thank you, and thank you to everyone at caregiver.com for all the work and support and education and all the tools that you continue to provide.